But coalition agreements between rival parties aren't easy to make quickly. The changing of the political guard can take many weeks in other countries, as detailed policy agreements need to be hammered out and then approved by each party. But here on day 5, people were reaching the end of their tether.
If you had to design the worst possible context for conducting the formation of a government, the context in which we do it in Britain would be it. Everyone is shattered, tired. They're also lumped together in the centre of Whitehall with helicopters whirring overhead, journalists surrounding every move, with it being almost impossible to get in and out of 10 Downing Street without being literally attacked by a whole bevy of television cameras.
All may have seemed unclear on the morning of the 5th day, but in truth, this was the fog of political war. Gordon Brown's going had opened up the possibility of a coalition between Labour and the Liberal Democrats, but it had also removed the one man with the will and the authority to make it happen. And so David Cameron and Nick Clegg now realised that if there was to be any deal, it had to be between them.
I remember having a conversation with David Cameron, and that was a very important telephone conversation. We both said, no, look, we've got to just do better than that. Either go the whole hog, make the big compromises, really make this work, or frankly, it's not worth it at all. I think in our own separate ways, we came to the same conclusion that you can't kind of half do this. You either do it and do it properly, or you don't do it at all.
Nick Clegg may have made up his mind, but he still didn't have a deal with the Tories or his party's backing for it. He needed Gordon Brown to stay in office until he did. That afternoon, there were a series of phone calls between Brown and Clegg, the Lib Dem leader asking for more time. But Gordon Brown and his allies sensed that any hope of a deal between them was at an end.
All of us were becoming increasingly frustrated by the way in which Nick Clegg was playing this, because it was sort of, we didn't think it was genuine, and we thought Gordon was being used.
I did ask him just to hold on, and that I just thought there was a sort of constitutional propriety, if you like, given that he was the acting Prime Minister, to wait to see whether a stable government could be formed before he went to the palace.
And we thought that was not fair, and that he ought to be able to leave Downing Street with dignity.
And I didn't think it was right, and I still don't think it was right, simply for one person in that sort of triangle, if you like, to suddenly unilaterally declare, I'm fed up with this, I'm going to pull the plug on the whole process.
For the Lib Dem negotiators, it was now a race against time. Could they hammer out a deal with the Tories before Gordon Brown's patience snapped?
We occasionally would have civil servants popping in, their heads round the door, saying, we've got a very upset Prime Minister who, we're trying to hold on to, but is going to be off to Buckingham Palace any moment.
Gordon Brown's advisers were desperate to ensure that he didn't resign in the dark. They feared that he'd look like a burglar, leaving the scene of a crime. But the palace wanted him to stay until the Tories and Lib Dems had done a deal, as the Queen's private secretary made clear to Peter Mandelson.
I spoke to him in the corridor and said, look, this is really getting quite difficult for the Prime Minister. And he said, look, I fully understand. Nobody likes it, but equally the Prime Minister has a constitutional obligation and duty to remain in his post until the Queen is able to ask somebody, either Gordon or an alternative, to form an administration. He'll have to wait a bit longer until things become clearer.
But when Nick Clegg called back at 5:30, Gordon Brown had had enough. The call was witnessed by a single photographer and by a handful of advisers, amongst them Alistair Campbell, who wrote a note of the conversation in his diary.
Clegg called and asked for more time, then again, but finally GB said, time for what? Unless you can tell me you've broken off talks with the Tories in favour of discussion with us, I'll assume you're going with the Tories. I'm now in an impossible position. I have to go to the palace. Nick, I have to do this now. I can't stay on. It's a choice one way or the other. You've made the choice. I'm not going to hold on. The final words were, OK, thanks Nick, goodbye. Then he turned to us and said, OK, let's do it.
Gordon Brown's decision to call time caught the civil service, the palace and David Cameron on the hop.
I remember having to ring Samantha and saying, what are you doing? And she was doing Nancy's homework. And I said, well, we could be going to the palace. You'd better get your frock on.
Gordon Brown now prepared to leave Downing Street for the last time and assembled his staff to say farewell.
And then Sarah and the boys arrived, and I think it was Fraser who shouted out, "Come on, Daddy, we're going." And then people just laughed at that, and Gordon spoke, made a very nice speech to the staff. It was the end of a long campaign, and a long and pretty torturous and exhausting few days. So there were quite a lot of people in tears at that point. I think for us, it was 13 years, we'd been in power, and you knew this was it.
Here at number 10 Downing Street, the Prime Minister is about to come out and announce, we think, here he comes.
I've informed the Queen's private secretary that it's my intention to tender my resignation to the Queen. In the event that the Queen accepts, I shall advise her to invite the Leader of the Opposition to seek to form a government. Above all, I want to thank Sarah for her unwavering support as well as her love, and for her own service to our country. I thank my sons, John and Fraser, for the love and joy they bring to our lives. And as I leave the second most important job I could ever hold, I cherish even more the first, as a husband and father. Thank you, and goodbye.
Prime Minister Gordon Brown, his voice slightly cracking as he paid a tribute to his wife Sarah, goes back into number 10 briefly. The children come out.
It was a liberation as well as painful. His duty and his desire to do the right thing made him want to stay if he possibly could, and at the point where it was clear it wasn't, it was right, okay, I'm done. I'm out. I'm gone. I'm liberated. I can go and be me. And I think there was part of him which felt, well, I can go with dignity. And he was not going to have Nick Clegg take that away from him.
I remember standing next to George Osborne as we watched Gordon disappear off down the Mall to put in his resignation. I looked around the room thinking, my God, what has happened here? We've ended up in a situation where we could well have a Lib Dem Tory coalition, which I never expected was likely to happen. We've changed the government. The future of British politics is going to be very, very different. Are we doing the right thing or the wrong thing? I mean, there's a sense both of excitement and fear, in a way.
The Lib Dems decided that they wanted to go with the Conservatives. They then created alibis as to why they did, that it wasn't possible to do it because of the numbers, because of the body language of our negotiators, but these were essentially alibis. They had taken a decision to go in with the Conservatives. It was a perfectly honourable decision for them to have taken, but there's no point trying to blame it on others. It was a decision that they took themselves.
The car carrying David Cameron is coming down the Mall towards Buckingham Palace.
David Cameron would be Britain's next Prime Minister, but he still couldn't be sure if he'd be governing alone or sharing power.
It meant then there was a bit of a scramble. And in fact, while David Cameron was on his way to the palace, Nick Clegg and I were still changing in our handwriting the coalition agreement at the last minute.
And so I went to see Her Majesty, and she asked me to form a government, and I said I couldn't be totally sure about what sort of government I was going to form. I said that I hoped to form a coalition government, but I might have to come back in the morning and tell her it was something rather different. I aim to form a proper and full coalition between the Conservatives and the Liberal Democrats. This is going to be hard and difficult work. A coalition will throw up all sorts of challenges. But I believe together we can provide that strong and stable government that our country needs. Thank you very much. It had happened so quickly, and I hadn't expected things to happen that night. So it was quite unexpected and quite a strange feeling. And I remember sort of walking through that and ending up in the office just there. And at that moment thinking, right, this really has happened.
Waiting for him on the other side of that famous black door was the Cabinet Secretary, who felt that he'd achieved his goal of a swift, smooth transition of power.
It was one of those events that just sheer relief that we got one out and the other one in, to be perfectly honest, within half an hour. And finally, there was a Prime Minister, not after 40 days, but after 5, actually coming through the door and clear that we would almost certainly have a full coalition government.
Next into Downing Street was William Hague, a man who'd led the process of compromise to end the Tories' long years in opposition.
I'm not a very emotional person, I think the country knows. But I was thinking of 13 years before, I was the last Conservative cabinet minister to look at the cabinet room as we walked out. And being there again, able to think again about what we'll actually do for the country instead of talking about it for 13 years was a very exciting moment. And to come to power in those circumstances, of course, was dramatic.
Nick Clegg had gone from dismay on election night to Deputy Prime Minister in just 5 days.
I was aware that we had achieved something extraordinary, that we were kind of walking through a door to something completely new. I was absolutely convinced we'd done it for the right reasons, but immense uncertainty about what would happen next.
David Cameron's boldness had secured power for his party, but only at the price of abandoning some of their cherished aims.
I would rather have a majority government. It's what I was aiming for, fighting for. It's what I've devoted the last 5 years of my life to. But when fate deals you a different hand, you've got to play it to the best of your ability.
Their political marriage may look blissful, but the relatives of the happy couple are growing increasingly restless.
You know that old thing, if you have a dog, then eventually, for long enough, eventually you begin to look like your pet. Well, if you have a coalition partner, then it seems to me there's a very grave risk eventually you'll come to look like him.
That's an anxiety shared on both sides of this coalition. Many are simply waiting for it to fail. Others, though, predict that the politics of compromise and deal-making may be here to stay.
I think that the possibility exists for coalition politics to be a feature of British democracy for some time, and therefore we in the Labour Party have got to be thinking alliance, coalition, partnership, because that may be the only way in which we get back into power, or it may be the next way we get back into power. We'll see.
Throughout my political lifetime, certain truths have seemed self-evident. Hung parliaments would lead to instability. Coalitions, they did those abroad, didn't they? And the parties of the centre and left would surely one day come together. But those 5 heady days in May changed all of that. Now, this coalition may fail, and if it does, politics may revert to normal. But if it doesn't, the decisions taken by men who were exhausted, who were under huge personal, political and economic pressure, may well have changed British politics for good.
Setting sail for the Irish Sea and a circular trip to visit every country in the British Isles. Coast is tomorrow at 11:20 here on BBC Two.